Okay, so let's go down the road. Roger, do you have any questions for Troy? Oh, yeah, you have a mouthful.
No, it's okay. Well, my question is, okay, there's the work we do in here, and then there's the parks themselves and being a representative for the parks. And how do you see that all fitting in and taking it outside of our meetings here?
Are you asking what I would do out, in addition to meeting here, what I would do in the community? Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of parks, a big part of Parks and Recreation is it creates the community or helps create the community in Oregon City. And so, number one, and I guess maybe the simplest thing is talk to my own circle when I'm out and about rather than remain quiet. And then not knowing exactly, I guess, what the position is you're talking about as far as the going out in public as a representative,
an advocate.
Okay, yeah. Then take on assignments as necessary or as available to, in addition to just talk to my own circle, showing up at public meetings, listening to folks, bringing that information back, dissecting it, and intentionally reaching out to ask people questions about what they think.
Lisa?
What makes you interested in Parks and Recreation Committee?
Well, I guess my first interest is Oregon City. Like I said, I've been here 6 years, and I lived here 15 years ago for a couple of years, but raised my 2 kids here. And so that's my first interest. And then I love the community that Oregon City has. And I just see Parks and Rec as I guess you could say, a piece of that. I don't know, there's no one else in the room. It seems more fun than some of the other committees. You put Parks and Rec and you're like, yeah, that sounds cool. So maybe because of the outside work and the parks and just the facilities that I guess that you represent, kind of makes it more enjoyable to me instead of just talking all the time.
Thank you.
What are your favorite parks?
Oh, my favorite?
And why?
Probably Carnegie. I walked here. I live halfway between here and the library. So seeing that evolve, the library addition, and watching that park change, and then the history that goes with Mr. Carnegie and donating that property as a library, keeping it as a library, I don't know, that's always just become fun. Not to mention, it's close enough to home, I can let my kids go there and I can look out the window and see them.
Okay, thank you.
If there's one thing you could change about the park system or a particular park, what would it be?
Oh boy. I don't know if I'd say a particular park. It's easy to say every park should have everything, right? But then you've got funding and then you've got the park location where, what's feasible for that area. And so I don't know. I guess I would say, I don't know if I would change anything because the only thing that sticks out in my mind as being an issue that I've ever thought about changing. But I do think it's important to, I guess, continually look at all the parks, the demographics in the area, what's right around the park, who's moving in, who's moving out, and make sure the park continues to accommodate that smaller community within Oregon City to make sure that those that live there are being best served. And certainly anyone outside that immediate neighborhood can visit, can participate. But I think it's important that each park kind of has its own identity a little bit for that community.
So you can't answer not enough money. So other than not enough money.
Yeah, that was kind of hesitation in the other answer.
What's the biggest challenge you think we have in our parks?
Ooh, that I think now I have to guess what you guys are talking about for the last how many years?
What do you think?
What do I think? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Not what PRAC has been working on.
okay.
What do you think are the challenges? What do you want to work on if you're appointed to this committee?
I would say more publicity. I think our parks are good. We've got, you've got Singer Hill there, Singer Park rather, nice walking area. You've got Chapin Park, nice big area, play area, multi-use. You've got Carnegie, that's a smaller community area. So I think the parks are good. I like them. But if we could get the word out to people more, other than just driving by, maybe the events that are hosted in the parks are rotated a little bit to get people an opportunity to see each park, even though we're not a big enough community that they shouldn't be able to see it anyway. But just to reach out to them and encourage them, I think that would be a good thing.
Great, thank you.
So I see your address. You live in the McLaughlin neighborhood,
I live 1 block from here, yes.
and after it said 526th Street, and then it said no address on the application. What did that mean?
It said no address?
That's what I think it shows up on the.
I don't think I added no.
It was a difference
just the
between,
way
Formatting.
That's
Yeah.
just the form.
I do have an address. It's at 526th Street. No, it's at 526th Street. I don't know what the no address is.
We're actually neighbors because I live over on 524 on High Street, so we're just.
Okay,
blocks away.
so you're just down around the corner. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay.
I see where you've been active in Boy Scouts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd like to know a little more about that and how the city can play a better role in accommodating the council in the Oregon City area.
That's a great question. Boy Scouts of America is one of my all-time favorites. I started when I was 8 years old, and I was an Eagle Scout. We grew our troop. Well, we grew our pack when I was with the Cub Scouts. My son's 12, and so I've kind of moved up with him. So when we were Cub Scouts before the Boy Scouts, we doubled the size of our pack, which is nothing huge. We went from, actually went from like 5 to 12 in a matter of 6 months just by getting the word out. We had a big dinner. We wanted to recognize, there's a blue and gold banquet every February. We wanted to recognize a lot of the people in the community. And so Mr. Holliday was there. The chief band was there, the sheriff, the fire chief, school board chair. We invited the principal for each one of the boys, make sure their principal represented them there. Superintendent Didway was there. So we brought the whole community in and just really thanked them for what they did and made sure they knew what we did and what we brought to the community as far as the Cub Scouts. And then now our boys are a little bit old and there's Boy Scouts. We've got about a group of about 22 to 23 boys. They're all involved in the community. We're probably the second largest troop in the Oregon City area. The first meets over here at St. John. I think they're quite a bit bigger than us.
Where do you meet at? Where did you meet at?
We meet at the LDS Church up on Henrici,
Oh, yes.
just past the high school there. And I would say, which the church is really good about offering us their building. Most of the participants there aren't members of that church, but everyone's welcome. What the community can do, I think first probably comes on the part of the Boy Scouts is to make sure that everybody knows what we can do and what we can offer and why it's valuable. And then the community can send us people. Boys who are in Boy Scouts get in less trouble. They do. And so if we can get more boys involved in Boy Scouts, we tend to tighten families through Boy Scouts, and we keep kids out of trouble. So first is us telling you what we do, and second is send us all your people, all your kids, like everybody, and we'll help them. We'd love to do it.
Mm-hmm.
back to Roger. Do you have another question?
What would you think about how we can get? Well, you've already said something about advertising, so the parks more. And how do you think we could go about that?
Well, you used advertising, and my day job is marketing and PR. There is a slight difference between advertising and marketing. Maybe it's a little bit of semantics, but I would say more marketing than advertising. Advertising is a lot of just printing flyers and billboards and commercials and that kind of stuff. Marketing really is the getting out in the public and letting people know. And I think a great way to do that is having representatives set up booths through community events. Night out would be a good one. All the families come. Hosting different events in the various parks. And a lot of these, I know there's money involved, but we have people in the community that are willing to help. We just have to ask them. And so I think the funds to put on, whether it's a family picnic or a book reading for kids or music or whatever, I'm not looking at big dollars. I think it's just about getting out and telling people. And it's partnering with the library, telling them, with every book that's checked out, maybe slip this in the deal. Put this in your newsletter. Every association has a newsletter or some sort of thing that they send out. Go to them and ask them to include it. And most of them would, because their goal is very similar to that of Parks and Rec, is to bring the families and the community together. And if we can give them the event, they can give the venue, as making sure people know about it.
Lisa, any last question?
I do. How would you decide between competing interests or demands?
For example,
For example, community interest, community demands. How would you prioritize or decide one is better than the other, or one is more important than the other?
and you're talking as a member of the committee when we have multiple issues that we're discussing, right? What gets our attention, maybe what gets the resources, but at least our attention.
Yes.
That's a tough one, because I think there's a lot of criteria. I don't think it's if this, then that. I don't think it's just a one for one. But I do think what's the greatest need, and that could be because of repair or growth or whatever. And I think how you determine the greatest need is asking your community. We may think that something needs to be repaired or improved, and the community is screaming that they want something else. And so I think the need has to be it. I also think the greatest reach, because we serve Oregon City, we want to serve the community the best we can. Not everybody gets what they want, unfortunately. And so how can we benefit the greatest amount of people and maintain that community feel? And I think that's really what has to get the attention.
Thank you.
Okay, we're running short on time. Does
Okay.
anybody else have any questions,
good.
Mike? Did you have another question?
Well, I have a question I might ask several of the applicants. I see where you submitted for different boards. You've planning, as well as HRB, as well as this one. I won't ask you what a preference is, but I know that probably just being selected to one's enough of a commitment in the evenings to probably suffice. Would you have any problem serving on more than one board at a time?
I would not have any problem with it as long as it doesn't conflict with my family. My family's the number one. My daughter's 21. She's kind of on her, she lives with me, but she's kind of on her own. My son's 12. I'm a single parent. That's my number one.
Yeah.
So if I can make it work and give it the attention it needs, absolutely, I'd love to serve. But I can't do it at the risk of my family.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Just one quick follow-up to that then. If you did have to choose one committee to serve on, I know you already said Parks is the funnest, so, but would you imagine that PrAC would probably be your first choice, or where would you rank in your criteria if you had to select?
Parks is the most fun. So yeah,
Excellent.
I'm all about having fun, right? And I mean, the truth is, not to sound cliche, but I'll serve wherever I'm needed. I know there's lots of applicants, and sometimes it's not first choice, but where everyone fits in the best. And I'm totally fine with any of them. There's a reason I didn't apply for all of them, right? And so the three that I applied for are the three that I'm interested in, and I'll serve wherever. But certainly Parks and Rec is always fun.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, next applicant, Karen Mori.
Hello.
Thank you, Aaron.
Can we
I'm gonna
start
say,
the other
don't
end?
introduce yourselves, except hello, Christopher. I've never had the pleasure of meeting you.
All right, we're gonna change it up. Bill, do you have any questions for Karen?
Yes, I do. How did you decide, or why did you decide that you'd want to apply for PrAC at this point in your time in the community?
Partially because some naming things brought my attention back to parks. Also, I spend my entire day working on Oregon City history. Part of that, I had gotten into some of the history of the parks, and I've become more active with the Friends of the Cemetery. And the recent attempt to cite a pot shop too close to the cemetery brought a lot of attention in the city back to the fact that Mountain View Cemetery is a park, and it's maintained by the park department. And I've spent time in every park in town doing something. I think Parks and Rec are very important, and I kind of have a perspective of how it's grown in the city and become more important, and the level of support it does and doesn't get. A lot of the doesn't get. I'd kind of like to be a voice to advocate for more for the parks.
Thank you.
Mike?
So, same question that I asked before. What do you think is the biggest challenge? You can't answer not enough money. But other than not enough money, what's the biggest challenge that our parks face?
Deferred maintenance. Is that not quite money? And the ability to maintain. You've got a lot of growing things, you've got a lot of growing grass, you've got a lot of growing weeds, you have swimming pools in parks that aren't supposed to have them. One of which I understand has been corrected. And there's community demand for facilities. Some parks, like Berkeley Hills, has added an adorable play structure. But, other people in other parks may have aging infrastructure, may have no infrastructure, and eventually the neighbors start getting jealous, and you've got to be able to distribute the funds where they're needed and maintain things.
Great. Thank you.
With your history of, or knowledge of history in the city, what's the most interesting park?
Atkinson.
Why?
The family history. Reverend George Atkinson donated, or actually his family donated that property to the city. His son-in-law, who was one of the donors, is one of 2 people from Portland to die on the Titanic. And his wife was saved and had health issues from then on. So the family kind of, once they donated the property, were sort of hands off, and what became the park didn't get any attention paid to it for a very, very, very long time. It was part of the city. The rest of the property was parceled off into lots, and that gorgeous bluff top property just sort of sat there. And eventually, the Buena Vista Club took a little interest and moved a house from down here someplace to start their clubhouse. And it was kind of part and parcel. Buena Vista used to be a community within the community, and it was the heart of Buena Vista. So it's got the more interesting and intriguing history of the parks in town.
Do you use the swimming pool? And if so, how frequently?
I haven't for a very long time.
Okay, so you know the swimming pool is part of
Oh, yes.
parks. takes care of.
Most definitely. Been in the meeting rooms. When my son outgrew the wading pool, we didn't live in the city.
And so besides Atkinson, which is your favorite park to visit?
Rivercrest,
Because it is
close.
local. Okay.
And it has a lot of variety of activities.
Lisa?
What is your opinion of the off-leash dog areas?
Not a huge fan if they're not fenced. And I'm noticing a lot of conflict between dogs on social media, mixed sizes, and maybe people who don't understand that if you're going to an off-leash park, you need to have voice command over your animal. But I know that the park area next to the old Barclay School is an off-leash park, and it's on 2, not overly busy streets, but it makes me uncomfortable that there's no barrier to the streets and sidewalk if you're letting your dog romp in that area. Of course, I'm also a cat person, so my cat doesn't care.
Thank you.
So I know that you do a lot of advocating for the parks with your volunteers at the cemetery. What things do you think you could bring to this group? Most of us on here, I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. So what kind of things do you see bringing to this group then? As far as experience and besides your historical knowledge.
Let's see, that's an interesting question to try to answer. I guess part of it is I love the fact that we've got the number of parks that we have and the variety of offerings in the different parks. And I was kind of chuckling while Troy was answering your question, something crossed my mind. I am very active in local social media, not always with positive outcomes. However, people seem to notice if I post things. And I do occasionally post things about parks and remind people that something's going on in a park nearby. People will post and ask, where can I, my 80-year-old grandfather's here, where can I take him for a walk? And, families visiting, they've got young kids, where can we go? And I'll point out different parks and walking trails and things in the city. I'm not shy answering questions, and I do randomly promote things.
Do you have any other questions down here?
So Mountain View Cemetery, and it's not often that cities are involved in cemetery work. There's generally a contract sometimes to another agency or outside agencies. Do you have a preference in how you see that facility improving in its ability to serve the community, but at the same time be able to pay for itself, or at least break even?
I think it's done pretty well. There have been rocky years. The city also, I think about starting in the 70s, found out if you build mausoleums, they will come. We have competitive rates compared to surrounding areas, and we have remaining in-ground spots and a variety of things. The biggest problem with the cemetery is you've got graves there that are 170 years old. There is no perpetual maintenance on a 170-year-old grave. Some of the newer ones, they've built in things. And I think I do believe it should at least break even and build something up for the future. But I'm glad that our cemetery is city maintained, because I've seen a lot of private cemeteries that have ended up abandoned or badly neglected. And it is the oldest municipal cemetery in Oregon. And that's thanks to Dr. Barkley, who realized that you didn't want dead bodies too close to downtown. The man understood the disease theory.
Thank you.
I noticed that you mentioned that you're compiling a history of some of our parks. What's your plan with that when it's done?
What I'm trying to do, I'm finding out that a lot of the information on the city is in 100 different locations. What I'm going to try to do is put it into a single location. I was telling Phil earlier, I got kind of sidetracked on the cemetery again. But I'm going through the minutes starting in 1850, year by year, doing a spreadsheet.
Did you say 1850?
1850 starts the city council minutes.
Okay.
And I'm going through year by year doing a spreadsheet of what happened, and then just kind of the highlights of that year. I'm only going to do that through 1923, which is when we changed to a commission system. That will be a book, but then I'll come all the way to current with specific things. So I'll finish the history of the library that I started writing 10 years ago, history of the cemetery, history of the parks, and try to get all the information basically out of the minutes into one volume. So in the future, if people have questions about something about Oregon City, they don't have to go 100 places to look for it. Hopefully, most of it, or enough information to know where to start looking, will be in one place.
Thank you.
Besides CIC, Citizens Involvement Council, are you on any other boards currently?
Friends of the Cemetery.
And Friends of the Cemetery, which is not
onerous.
Well, it's not city, it's Friends of the Cemetery. Okay, and did you apply for any other positions
I did not.
at this time? Okay. Do you have a question?
Just one more. Why are parks important to you? Karen?
Green space, recreation space, community gathering space. We're Oregon. And I think that it's wonderful to look at Oregon City and see that wherever you live, you have some open space alternative. And it's green and pretty.
Thank you.
Roger, do you have any other
I'm
questions?
fine.
You
Thank
good?
Or full of ivy.
All right.
You didn't give me the opening, though, that you gave Troy. He said, give you a
Okay,
fun
all right.
fact.
Okay, give me a
Today's
fun
fun fact that what I posted on Facebook yesterday. Did you know that the third Munchkin trumpeter from The Wizard of Oz is buried at Mountain View Cemetery?
The what?
The third Munchkin trumpeter. So when they come in with the big trumpets, the gentleman, Chester Howerton, who played that role, is buried at Mountain View. He was only 2 feet 6 inches tall, so he didn't take a lot of room.
Oh, he still gets a full plot.
He did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. Jeremiah.
Did we tell Doug that it's okay that he comes in? Doug is sick.
He's wandering.
He's gone now, never mind.
That is, he knows that he's welcome to come in if he wants to. He's waiting for his time. Biding his time. Welcome. Okay, so
Excuse me.
tell us a fun fact about yourself.
Oh, boy.
I once was on the winning team of a now defunct TV show when I was in high school called High Five.
I remember that.
I remember that too.
The winning team.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember High Five show.
Make sure that was in there.
All right. Okay. That particular episode, your team won.
Yeah.
All right. Who'd like to start?
So Troy, right?
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
How does your background relate to parks and being on this board?
Aside from simply being a user of parks, my background does not, quite honestly, in transparency, relate. And from my side of the bench, I think that is the benefit. There are no preconceived notions. I've been a resident, I'm actually technically not even a resident of Oregon City. I live just outside the city limits. But I've only lived in this area for 2 years. So, I mean, I'm sure I'll get to the other points, but quite honestly, in transparency, it doesn't directly relate. It's just a desire to be involved in the community, a desire to be impactful, and to advocate for the things that build the city both now and for the future.
Do you have any comments regarding our parks? Any improvements that could be made or any compliments?
The parks that I have visited, out of the selection that is available in Oregon City, I've been very, very pleasantly surprised. I really enjoy the combination of new facilities on old property. I really like that juxtaposition. In particular, Kenema Park. It's my favorite by far. Hopefully that doesn't answer a question down the line prematurely. But my grandmother grew up here. She graduated from Oregon City High School back in the 30s. So I have pictures from my family history that I'm actually been able to match up with certain things. So that's what I like the most. That's the biggest compliment. I think my biggest critique would be awareness outside of city limits. Being someone that lives outside the city, if I did not take the initiative to learn about the parks or actually go to them physically, I would know next to nothing about them. I don't know if and maybe that's just a lack of knowledge on my part, but I think the awareness outside for those people, Beaver Creek, out towards Malala, Park Place, the Bradley area off of Redland, do they know? Because they're not within the city limits, and so technically they're not paying for. And so are they taking advantage of them? Are they generating income in some way for their parks? So that's my biggest critique, I think, from what I've seen in the short time I've been in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd like a clarification. When you said Kanema Park, are you talking old Kanema Park or the Kanema Children's Park?
I am talking, I guess I don't know the distinction, to be honest. The park on the top of the bluff with all the walking trails.
So the children's play equipment and then the walking trails that lead
Correct.
to the Metro property?
Correct.
Okay, so that's Kanema Children's Park.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
There's also an old Kanema Park, which is much different. What are some of the challenges that you see are facing the parks in Oregon City?
I think my biggest concern, which I somewhat alluded to, is the perpetuation for posterity down the road. I see parks as it's a big draw, regardless of what city you live in. Families don't move to cities that don't have parks, quite honestly. And Oregon City has a huge selection of parks to choose from. I think my concern is how do you maintain that large of a portfolio in a way that maintains them properly for posterity, for the perpetuation of it down the road, because it's not just about, how is Oregon City using these parks to attract people now, which it seems like it's doing very well. How is it going to do for the future as well? Because cities don't last 150 years or 170 years by being short-sighted. You have to have foresight. And I think that's my biggest concern for a number of different things within the city.
So other than wanting to give back to the community, you must have thought when you applied for this position that you could add value and you could bring something to the table. What is that?
Like I alluded to earlier, simply just a lack of preconceived notions about the city. I don't have a personal history in Oregon City, so my tongue will be stayed a little bit, quite honestly, because I'm one of those people that likes to absorb and then report later. So I'm more methodical in how I approach things. So the emotion is not there. It's going to be a more stoic approach. It's going to be a more logical approach. And quite frankly, I have youth on my side. I'm less than 40. I'm of a different demographic than, to be completely honest, anyone on the board. So I just bring that a different approach, and that's not a knock necessarily at all. It's just it's a different mindset necessarily that could be valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I'll ask it just so we can get a little deeper into it. That other than not enough money,
Yeah.
what is the biggest challenge you think that faces our park system?
I would agree with what Troy said earlier, in that he felt like there was somewhat of a lack of awareness or a lack of. I think that is a big deal, and that's coming from being outside of the city limits, like I mentioned previously. I get a couple newsletters a year that mention that I have a map of where the parks are, but if I didn't go to the website or didn't engage in social media, I would really have no awareness of what the Oregon City Parks systems was or what was available to use or take my kids to. I think that's a pretty big challenge, especially in today's day and age where everybody wants information right now. So, people are going to be looking for it. So is the committee or is the city in general engaging that to promote awareness? But then there are still people that like the old-fashioned way. They like to get the newsletter. They like to see on the bulletin board at the library. So a lot of the same things that Troy said, I would echo those. Simply saying, there's a combination of old style and new style, and how do you integrate that to just bring awareness to the population, because there are a lot of people moving to this area at a fairly rapid rate. So they're going to move here and they're going to want to know these things. They're going to be searching for that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, I noticed on your community involvement, it's quite large. And I wanted to explore a little more about the youth sports coach. And
Sure.
you're apparently at Oregon City Community Education. You could tell me what that is and how that compares or contrasts with the youth sports coach at North Clackamas Parks and Recreation. Is there differences in those communities?
Aside from the kind of the logistics or semantics of, I was a basketball coach in both cases. Aside from the semantics and the logistics relating directly to basketball, the organizations are very similar in how they're run, structured, otherwise. That was one of the first things I did when I moved here. As my son was at the time in 3rd grade and he wanted to play basketball, and I had coached my daughter when she was the same age. And so I actually wanted to compare. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Could I, provide a positive feedback to that program? I think the biggest thing that I noticed in difference was there is a heightened sense of structure and organization. Although the structure is similar, the organization level in North Clackamas was significantly higher than what I ran into through the Oregon City Community Education Department. The quality of the kids, that's the same across the board. You're going to run into all the same stuff, all the same, behavioral issues and things like that. But it was, and I think that was directly related to parental involvement. The numbers in talking with the community organizer for Oregon City basketball, he was begging basically people to step up. At one point I had a discussion with him about running 2 teams simply because there were not enough people volunteering, which I think is a sad realization. But that was the big difference. North Clackamas Parks and Rec, for whatever reason, they have to turn people away. They have an application process that is, they actually vet their people because they can. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Well, I would definitely like to talk to you about people getting turned away from volunteering.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was necessarily getting turned away, but they would basically say, rather than being a head coach, can you be an assistant? Or, people were coming and saying, I want to be a head coach, but they would say, we have a lot of head coaches. Can you do an assistant? Or can you help run the games themselves? Can you be a referee? So it wasn't they were turning them away necessarily. I apologize if that's the way it came across.
Oh, no.
But they definitely had, it was a very good problem to have. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'd like to pursue that further but I can't because I'd probably be doing it from a self
Right. We don't have a lot of time here.
angle. But aesthetically, how do you feel about our parks?
Like I said before, I really like the contrast between you have new equipment and old properties.
Okay.
I do like that. But
Let me put in a different word then. Environmental aesthetics, as far as how do you feel about our parks then? I mean, what you see around you, besides buildings or...
right. What I have seen, like I said before, I have not been to all the different parks in the Oregon City portfolio, but what I have seen, I think they've been integrated very, very well into the communities. The one exception, although actually this is one of my favorite parks, is the Wesley Lynn Park. And clearly the space was used either, I don't know how it was, if it was given, donated, purchased by the city. I don't know the history there, but I mean, you're directly under two very, very large electrical towers. You know, parents have concerns about being under those kinds of wires, about high tension electricity. So that aesthetic is not, but that's only one example. Everywhere else that I've been, I felt has been integrated very, very well into the communities, surrounded by houses. You have really wide open green spaces. It seemed to be planned very well. And it didn't seem, from what I've seen, that to be compromised, meaning like they didn't try and squeeze something in where it didn't belong and then compromise the integrity of the entire park at large.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, anybody else have any pressing questions? We're running a little short on time here. Okay, are we good? All right, thank you so much, Jeremy.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Jeremiah. All right.
Either
Thank
or.
you.
Either or. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Doug Neely, if you can hear us, please enter.
You're studying its notes.
Welcome, Doug. All right, we're going to start down here with Mr. Bill Daniels.
Hey, Doug. I think I read through this application and saw a trend here and a preference in both of the boards that you're currently serving on, and that one pretty much overlaps the other in many ways. And I'm assuming that's one of the reasons why you want to re-up again. Is there any other goals that you wanted to try to get through on PrAC in your next term, if you are so appointed?
Well, one of the things I think, I don't know if you were there at the point in time, but one of the things I'm hoping we can push for the next budget cycle is for signage of the paths that connect streets together. I think that's critical. I was staring at our trail news here indicating the facilities, and man, we got a lot of parks that we claim we have hiking trails on. And, well, it actually says, it doesn't say hiking, it's hiking and walking trails. But the point is, some of them have rather long ones that connect one part of the city to another. And there's no signage on them. I don't think many people know that there are, in fact, walking opportunities that'll take you through the parks. And there are several of them. So I brought that up earlier in the goal-setting session, but also realized at that particular time when we were looking at it, the budget had already been established for the next biennium. But I would like to see that coming forward on the other biennium. I think you've got so many people using bikes, a lot of people walking and jogging, and I just don't think they know there are some of the opportunities that we do have. The other one, of course, is the interest in the natural areas we do have in the parks. I would say trying to deal with some of the invasive species issues. Of course, some of you have been more involved in that on Waterboard Park. I haven't actually been involved in that, but I have in other parks, and it is another major concern of mine.
Thank you.
So, other than the signage, which I agree with you, is a huge opportunity, what did we not get done last year that you hoped we would have and that we want to work harder on this next year?
It's something I expressed to our director here that, our movies in the park and our concerts in the park are very, very successful. I would like to see the movies in the park expanded beyond the 4 weeks that we have them. It's a case of getting sponsorship, but I think we've been pretty successful in getting private sponsorship. So that's one thing I would like to see expanded. They're pretty well attended. The concerts in the park too, I actually would like, not on 4th of July, but we've got another week available to us in there, and perhaps have one that is kind of oriented to more of a patriotic thing, maybe one that you invite Willamette Falls Symphony to do, not on the 4th necessarily, but close to it, or maybe closer to Labor Day. So those are some things that I think we could expand, especially since they've been very successful programs.
Thank you.
I take a a line from Mike's past questions here. Aside from limited budget, with all the development going on right now out on Beaver Creek and up on Holcomb, what do you see as upcoming challenges for parks?
We don't have land. I mean, when I first went onto the city commission, we had what we called planned developments in which people could adjust their density and in the process donate land to the city for parks. We don't have that anymore, and we're not buying it. We've got a couple that we're developing, but the point is that development is going very, very rapidly, and between Filbert Run and Wesley Lynn, there's going to be nothing, and that's where a lot of the development's going on, and that's where I'm familiar with because I live there now, but that's throughout our city. We have to, even if we can't develop the parks right away, we have to get land.
Okay, thank you.
What is your favorite park and why?
Well, probably the park that I get involved in terms of invasive removal is, in fact, Abernathy Creek Park. It came into being while I was on the commission. FEMA money was used to purchase houses there. And in terms of where I walk, it's really Wesley Lynn is the one I like. It's the one I can extend my walking period through and be in an open space there for a period of time.
Do you have any problem with the off-leash dog area at Wesley Lynn?
None of them have chased me yet. No, I don't have a problem.
In your opinion, do you believe our parks are safe? It's safe in terms for the community, and this part two of that question is, do you think vandalism is a concern at all?
Well, it's always a concern. And I think parks have been pretty good in terms of making repairs when they occur. I haven't personally, I'm trying to think back personally if I've been a time I've been in a park that I've witnessed vandalism in them, but I'm sure it is occurring. I just don't know what degree is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from time to time I see something,
Yeah.
And just curious. Yeah. What would you do to improve the safety of our parks?
Have more aggressive dogs in our parks. I don't want to be facetious. It's a safety issue no matter what, and from the enforcement side, it has to be the police department. I don't think the parks wants to get involved in that kind of activity. We've got houses around most of our parks, so I would hope the citizens there would report things as they saw them. The difficulty is they may not fall into greater priority on some of the police department's requirements than others, but I don't see what else could be done other than perhaps identify some police officer that has a responsibility that includes looking at those particular issues, but I don't know what kind of priority you could put on that.
Thank you.
Roger?
Okay, so I guess the best question I can ask you is environmentally, what would you like to see happen environmentally besides, getting rid of invasives that would help lower the cost of maintaining the parks? Or is that not a question? Is that a statement?
That's a question, but the thing is that from the invasive standpoint, it's an ongoing process, and things always get away from us on those parks because we don't hit them on a regular enough basis to deal with them. I think it's an investment that we have to make and bring in actually professionals. Not only, I like volunteers and so forth, but the point is, I believe on some of these species that you're going to have to go ahead. You're going to have to spray it, and you're going to have to spray it over probably a couple seasons to bring those things under control. And then you're going to have a major planning activity to try to keep on it. But I think there has to be investment to do that. Bring in professionals that are well-trained to do that. Now, I realize our parks people are trained in that area, but we don't have enough staff, and we know that, are not well-funded. If we can convince the commission to seriously consider a parks district where we could have our own funding, and at the same time, like the library district, the city still contributes money, additional money to the library, in addition to the district money, to have some kind of commitment to have an ongoing source of revenue still coming in from the city while we build up revenues from the library district. And then we've got a dedicated force, and we probably can hire additional maintenance people.
Okay.
Anybody have any other pressing questions? Because we need to wrap this up so we can have time for discussion.
I wonder if Doug has an answer for homelessness in Newell Creek Canyon.
Or any other park.
The greater presence of people there will contribute. I think the pathway that Metro's putting on will make a contribution to it. It's a challenge. There are all kinds of reasons that people are homeless, and I generally don't make judgments about them, but it is a problem, and unless we come up with places where people can stay, homeless people can stay, we're going to have that issue. I don't know. I mean, I'm really pleased with our police department going out and having a officer directly working with the homeless people in a positive manner, and giving a couple of bathrooms out there, the toilets out there where they can access it, which we did not have before. The parks would I understand why, but the parks would lock up their facilities at night. And I've seen a case where there was fecal material right in front of the doorway at a bathroom, but the guy was trying to get into it, I'm sure. And now those are the kinds of things that will perhaps deal with some of the issues we have in our park system by having some facilities available to the homeless.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to close this session and have some discussion regarding the appointments.
Would you like to take a short recess or?
Thanks, Doug.
Yes, please.
Yes.
You're going to talk now?
So we're going to take a short recess and then go into our regular session in 5 minutes? 10
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Great.
Great.
Bill Daniels.
Did everyone get a chance to read the minutes from the October meeting?
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, citizen comments. Do we have any citizen cards for the meeting tonight? Seeing none from Phil, we'll move on to our presentations, which are none tonight. All right, down to general business, and this is what everybody's coming for tonight. The Carnegie Library Park naming discussion. All right, let's open it up.
So just some information to start off the discussion. As a reminder, the process that we've taken thus far and the decision that was made at the last meeting. So again, the current name of the facility is Carnegie Library Park and has been adopted as such by resolution in the commission. The PRAC committee has recommended previously to make a recommendation to the commission to change to Carnegie Park, which was rescinded at the last meeting that we had in October. And as of right now, we have no motion, no recommendation on the table to move forward in any capacity with name change. But this agenda topic is an opportunity for the group to discuss what you would like to do with the name of the facility, either keep the name as Carnegie Library Park or make a recommendation formally to commission to change the name to something other than Carnegie Library Park. I have discussed our current internal policy for parks with the city manager and feel comfortable with, given the history of the park and some of the topics that were brought up in the last meeting, that if it is the wish of this group to move forward with the name of Library Park, which seemed to be a preference of some on this committee, that I would bring that forward formally to commission after an appropriate amount of time to spread the word to the other citizen groups and neighborhood associations to let them know of the formal proposal, but that I would bring it forward to the city commission if that is the wishes of this group. The previous time that we met and decided to change the name from Carnegie Library Park to Carnegie Park, we did put together a subcommittee. Thought process on this is, I'm assuming it seemed like there were a lot of differing points of opinion, and that it might make more sense for this group to talk about the name of the park and decide whether or not there is an interest in just moving forward with a name and then go into a recommendation, as opposed to setting a subcommittee to make that recommendation and then come back and discuss again as members of the broader PRAC committee. So if we choose to maybe discuss what our options are, whether or not you would like to make a formal recommendation to the city commission, and again, then I would, if that is the choice, move forward in notifying all of the neighborhood association, CIC members, and bringing it to the commission at some point in the near future.
Doug?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about the meeting that was had in terms of as much of the positioning or where the signage would be, but I
Can you
think.
speak up, Doug? Could you speak up, please?
Yeah. There was a meeting that representatives from the neighborhood, I was there for this board, and I think, I don't know if anybody was there for the library board or not.
Oh, for the sign committee.
Yeah.
I'd like to try to keep the two separate when we're discussing. There was a meeting that happened to discuss the name of the sign.
Yeah.
And the conversation centered on the logistics of
But
what
what
the
I
sign
wanted to
would look
make
like.
the point was, I think in terms of a signage, there was discussion of having Oregon City Library, then an identification of the building, and then
Yes.
the park
Thank you,
at
that
one
is-
location.
Yeah, so the sign that would be on 7th Street, the subcommittee that was put together, of which Doug sits on that group as a representative of PRAC, and of which Bill sits on as a representative of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, did decide to, the new signage on 7th Street would state Oregon City Public Library with Carnegie Building and Library Park, in theory, if that's the name of the facility that we choose to move forward, to all be listed on the signage. I did not bring a copy of the most recent rendering, but very clean looking, very similar in the size of the type that's on there, as far as a larger block for the Oregon City Public Library, and then smaller block for the park name and Carnegie Building names underneath. So that group would be waiting to move forward in ordering of the sign. Mo has taken on, again, leadership in that, and will be ordering the sign once it is approved and once we have a name of the park to move forward with.
And a point I made at that meeting, the reason that the name was changed to Carnegie Library Park was that the library had in fact moved to Danielson's. And at that time, it was not anticipated that that site would operate as a library anymore. And we wanted to make sure that Carnegie was recognized in that park. That is, and of course, the library came back, and so that issue is no longer there, really.
Yeah, and I know that was Sean's not able to be with us this evening, but that was his his wish as well was to make sure that Carnegie was represented in some way at that site, and was one of the primary reasons for changing the name to the Carnegie Library Park in 2006.
Okay, Bill?
It seems like, and my memory doesn't always come through when it should, but it seemed like the last time that we met over at the Pioneer Community Center as a PrAC meeting back in October, that there was, I almost think it's a consensus that this board, or this group, thought that perhaps that we probably should and probably could rename that park back to its original name, which is Library Park. And then you had mentioned there was some issues that needed to be addressed, which apparently you've talked with the city manager about.
I have.
And so maybe if we could make a motion tonight on a finalization of the name for that sign on the corner of 6th and John Adams, as well as what would possibly be on the larger side on the corner of 7th and John Adams. And I'd be prepared to make a motion if I could.
Yeah, so just, thank you for bringing that point up. So again, the policy states that if it's named after a person, that it should be considered permanent for any of our facilities within our park system. Again, given the recognition of Carnegie on the signage in the front for the Carnegie building, and the timing with when the Carnegie Library Park was named, with the library moving locations and then coming back, it was just a different time and a different purpose of that facility. So that was where a lot of the discussion did happen. The city manager and I are both supportive of moving forward, recognizing that this is an alteration and a special circumstance, wanting to make sure that we are consistent with utilizing that policy, and in the future, if a board or commission or staff choose to change the name of something that's already named after a person, that it's done so with a great deal of process and thought before moving forward at all. And again, that it probably should be kept permanent. I think a highlight of that is when Karen brought up the history of Atkinson Park, and knowing the history of that space and why it was named after that family. I think that's something that is and should continue to be recognized by this group and by the city as a whole as we move forward and choosing to rename facilities if we choose to ever do so.
Yeah. Latterhead Park is very similar in that the Latterhead family lost a son who drowned and donated the land for the swimming pool that was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the official name as it stands today is Carnegie Library Park?
Carnegie Library Park is the current name, yes.
Well, I still think that even though there's a process, I think this board should make a recommendation. And I see no problem for us making a motion to, I mean, we're not changing it. We're just suggesting that change occur.
Correct. So this group is going to make a motion and vote to move forward if you choose to make a motion and vote on a name change. That name change then, again, I would make sure that that information is clearly facilitated to the other groups and committees within the city, and then bring it forward to the city commission at a future commission meeting. I would strongly suggest that there's representation from this group at that meeting when we move forward to clearly communicate the reason for the name change and the support for the name change.
Okay, any other discussion? Bill, would you like to make your motion?
I would like to make the motion. I would like to make the motion that we, as a committee, an advisory committee, that we would like to see that name change occur back to Library Park. And it'd be nice to find the original sign. We could just put it right back up there.
Well, the sign that's up there already says Library Park.
I'll second the motion. I would request that it be amended slightly to say that we recommend to the city commission and make sure it's in the form of a recommendation, rather than that we would like to actually formally say that we recommend.
I'll accept that amendment, thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll call the question. This might be a short meeting tonight. Okay, so Phil, would you?
Yes, so again, making a formal recommendation to City Commission to change the name of Carnegie Library Park to Library Park. And I will take roll. Daniels,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Gifford,
Aye.
Neely,
Aye.
Novak,
Aye.
Fowler Theis,
Aye.
and it passes. So I will send an email out to all the CIC representatives and make sure that they're aware. And then I will be putting it on the commission in one of the upcoming commission meetings. And again, if we can have representation in some form from this group to clearly communicate that to the commission as we move forward, I would appreciate it.
6B, Park SDCs. Thank you, Phil, for providing us with this copy.
Yeah. So thank you for the discussion that we had at the previous meeting in October, and I did send this out, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time to review via email. The Park SDC budget, again, is a fund that is collected on new development and is intended to expand the offerings and size of our ability to provide service to the community in parks and recreation offerings. Currently, if a homeowner builds a new home within our service area, they pay a $4,800 fee that goes to Parks and Recreation to provide those services. Again, with all of the new construction that's happening on the outskirts of the community, we're seeing pretty strong SDC commitments over the last couple of years. What we have on the SDC chart here, again, is revenues on the top and expenses on the bottom. We have an estimate of around $600,000 in charges for services, so SDC charges coming in for this fiscal year. What you'll see there is that we've already taken in almost $400,000, and we're only a third of the way through the fiscal year. This is through the end of October. So we're doing pretty well on SDCs coming in this year compared to expectations. The beginning cash balance at the beginning of this fiscal year was $4.3 million. And with the estimated charges for services and miscellaneous income coming in, we're expected to be at around $5 million by the end of this fiscal year. Down in the lower section is our actuals for expenses. So you'll see a couple of different accounts that we have, the professional technical services, repair and maintenance services, office and admin supplies, internal service charges, capital outlay, and contingency. So the contingency are items that they are within the budget, but we did not formally recognize or commit them to items during the budgetary process. So they are available to use, but they were not anticipated to be used during this fiscal year. The other items are areas of which we assumed that we would be making expenditures during this fiscal year, and thus are listed on the expense items. So the appropriations at the top is what has been allocated by the budget committee, and after staff recommendation and then adopted by commission. The expenditures for October, you'll see there in the next column, of which we had $545,000 expended during the month of October. That is primarily for the property acquisition of the 1 acre parcel directly next to Mountain View Cemetery. The year-to-date expenditures, again, $574,000, not much difference, and leaving us our balance of $4.4 million. The areas for accounts, we do have some, so the internal service charges are basically the finance department, GIS department, things for getting the SDCs, all the back-end items that need to happen in order to collect and deal with the SDC funds. The repair and maintenance services, those are items that have to do with properties that we've acquired using SDC funds. So we do rent out some of those properties, and they do supply some income for the city, and that's where the expenses we have, the expenses allocated towards maintaining those properties, taxes, and any repairs that need to be made. And then the professional and technical services is the first line item. Some of those things under the professional and technical services that I researched were, we had to do environmental phase 1 report for the property that we purchased. It would be listed under the professional and technical services. Additionally, our, which was a little strange and I haven't had time to follow up, but our, we do have a land lease on John Storm Park under the I-205 bridge, of which we have parking currently allocated for John Storm, and the fees that we pay to the state in order to use that space is paid for out of that budget line item. So with that, that's our SDC budget. Again, we're anticipated to be in that 600,000 or so range, both for this fiscal year and next fiscal year, of which makes our entire biennium budget. More than likely, that's a fairly conservative estimate. More than likely, we'll be over on both years. We also have the Cove development phase 2 and 3, which should be coming online very shortly. The units that they're putting in is, I believe, the most recent one was around 400 units, which would bring in a fair amount of money to the Parks STC budget as well. We're anticipating for this biennium that we will expend probably around $2 million total for our Parks STC budgets for the Glen Oak Park property, and would probably tail into the next biennium just a little bit as we develop Glen Oak Park. And then if we are successful in our grant processes for any other facilities, that would also tie into the SDC budget to use for those properties. The anticipated cost, for example, for Filbert Run Park was right around $1 million for the direct construction costs. And with those costs, as well as the cost for Glen Oak Park, we would have enough revenue still sitting in the budget to use for other uses, including possibly acquiring property and possibly using for the build out of the park operations facility, which is the reason why we started the conversation at the last month's meeting. So with that information, I'll open it up for discussion and any questions.
So in this biennium, other than what was already spent for the property acquisition, how much more do you see from SDCs for the park ops facility?
We've not finalized that number yet. I would envision, so the request that I will probably be moving forward to the city manager, and then what I would ask for recommendation from this group is probably somewhere in the $300,000 to $350,000 range in order to build out the facility to the size that the city commission requested. So a little background on the park ops facility, which we're kind of bleeding in a little bit to the next line item, next agenda item. But originally, when we set the budget for this fiscal year, it was to replace a similar size facility. We have a red tag facility that's been condemned, red tagged for quite a few years now. And our park operations staff are working out of a modular unit. With that, we recognize that that's not a long-term solution. We needed to try to find funding, and we did move forward with a request in the last budget process to replace like for like in size. And that was the $650,000, which is currently in the budget and is being paid for out of general funds. We went back to the city commission and presented options for, replacing like for like. And the response we got back from them was, this doesn't make sense. why are you replacing? We're a growing community. You will not have enough room to operate out of that facility within the next few years. You should be replacing with something that is a third to half as big as the current facility. And so with that, there was also some discussion from the city commission. We took them on a quick tour offered a tour of our facility, and they got to see the space, and many of them noticed the property next door, which was overgrown and bisects the property of the cemetery. And during the conversations with the commission talking about the size of the facility, they also suggested that, hey, it might make sense to look at the property next door as well. So as you are aware, we did purchase the adjacent property, and the recommendation from them was to look at, what we would need in order to provide that larger facility. So we did go back and we sized the facility to the size that they had requested, and we did cost analysis for what it may take to build out that same size facility, which was obviously more expensive than the smaller facility which we had originally advocated for. So that's kind of the process for getting to this point. The budget was set before we had a recommendation for the size of the facility that we would like to have. So we currently don't have dedicated funds to use for the larger facility. With that, we've tried to troubleshoot on the back end as staff and ways that we might be able to keep the cost down as low as possible, phasing appropriately so that we can minimize the expenses, as well as looking at our current budget and trying to determine if there's any way to utilize current dedicated resources within our budget to put towards the construction costs. Again, we'll be moving forward with going back to commission most likely in January to provide an update and again, a request I think of staff would be that if we can have a recommendation from this group, I think it would help in that communication with commission as to your feeling and stance on whether or not we should use SDC funds at all, or if there should be some other resources that we should be looking at. Again, we're as staff wanting to provide an appropriate size space and do it in a way that makes sense for providing the services long term. And again, we will do what is asked of our elected officials. So we're again just asking for a recommendation of this group to move forward.
Doug?
I have a question. I look at the amounts here that are paid out, and I was curious, the things like the maintenance, repair, office administration supplies and so forth, how's the distinction between these funds that are used versus the funds we get from our general fund tax dollars and so forth, which obviously these don't cover all our maintenance costs here, what you put here. How do you distinguish between what goes in, what's supported by SDCs and what's supported by the general fund?
Yeah, and we did have a meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to meet with Wyatt before coming here for an expanded period of time, but I'm assuming we have the miscellaneous income that's coming in, which is the rents that we receive from those facilities. So the thought process, again, I just have my my assumptions that I am making at this point. Okay. So I do apologize, but our miscellaneous income that is coming in, we had $43,000 budgeted for income that should be coming in from rents from our properties, and we have $10,000, which is going out for expenses tied to maintenance and property taxes. So we did, again, budget these numbers before acquiring the property, and so those both should see higher revenues coming in and probably slightly higher expenses going out as well. But they do more than compensate for the revenues, more than compensate for the expenses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from the group? Anyone want to put forward any recommendations to City Commission?
I don't know that's a recommendation, but I know that this is, I mean, I'm sounding kind of Pollyanna here because money doesn't grow on trees, but I realize that the parks facility qualifies for use of SDC funds because it's then used to provide services. And I get the need for it. I've toured that site. It's definitely needed. But given our critical need, as Doug mentioned earlier, for property acquisition, I've got a real philosophical objection to using SDC funds for this when, if we don't get some property now, we're not going to be able to get it after the fact. And the unfortunate thing about SDCs is they come in after the development is already underway and a developer already owns the property. So, it's pretty hard to build up a bank. And if you do build up a bank, there isn't any land left to buy. So, we've got a little bit of a bank, and I just really have a philosophical problem with using SDCs. And I think we ought to put pressure on the commission to do it without using our SDCs. That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah.
I share the same concern.
I agree. I've been thinking about acquisition ever since we started this topic. And, if a property were to become available, I think we should jump on that chance in one of these underserved areas. I think that should be a priority. I understand the maintenance, the Parks Department property, but it's, it should be a priority to acquire property as soon as we can, even if it's undeveloped, even if we have to budget for that later.
Yeah, as an example, I mean, I don't know if you're hearing the same thing in Park Place that I am, but, you see the trucks going up Holcomb every day,
Yes.
building roads out, and there's an assumption and a perception that there's going to be parks with that new development. And we all know that that's not the case till we get the land.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be repercussions when it comes to public perception and feedback if that doesn't occur. So we have to plan for something.
Agreed.
And when we look at that, I want to make a suggestion. Of course, we have land within an urban growth boundary, but we have the urban reserves, which aren't supposed to be a 40 or 50-year land supply. But if we could actually think ahead long enough to actually purchase land in the urban reserves that are not within our city boundaries, the land's bound to be cheaper. Even though you might have a 20-year period before you're going to be able to do much with it, it would be foresighted and to look at where those urban reserves are and see if we could secure land outside the city for the ultimate expansion.
I have a question on the same subject. I remember tackling this very same issue when we finally bought Wesley Lynn Park, so many years ago now at this point. And we didn't have as much of an SDC buildup at that time either. I think there was a law that the parks got their own SDCs away from, and you're probably more aware of this than I am, but I remember there was the issues about not having parks as a separate SDC out of the developer's pocket, as opposed to the other SDC funds that are also collected at the time of the development. The developers quite often would sacrifice, and that was in quotes, part of their development. It usually was an unbuildable part of that development that they had, and would quote unquote give that to the city. And quite often they were called pocket parks, and it probably was usable in many different forms of recreation, but certainly maintenance has and always will be a problem in pocket parks. And I don't know how either the city approaches knowing that some of these developments, and I don't know what the requirements are for pocket parks, but some of these developments certainly will have those opportunities to have open space for the citizens in that, well, actually the whole city, but certainly in that neighborhood. But you know, when you're looking at land banking, how much property are you looking at when you land bank? Is there a ratio or a formula that you're trying to get to figure out how much money you're going to have in your SDCs to buy property that is available?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. We do have, as part of our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, a recommendation that we do not look for properties that are less than 3 acres in size. We do have many pocket parks. They are difficult to maintain relative to the larger parks. We have equipment that we can mow, you know, large swaths of grass using the larger mowers. And when you go to a smaller pocket park, you have to get the mowers off of the truck beds, and you have to get them out into the park. And you're mowing something fairly small, and you're accounting for the travel distance from location to location. You also end up with probably comparatively more trim work and things like that as well. So the recommendation is we don't look to acquire pieces less than 3 acres in size. You will also notice that some of our parks, as you stated, were gifted in lieu of SDCs, and they typically are the sites that have less buildable lots. A perfect example that was brought up, I believe Karen brought up in her work session topic, is Berkeley Hills Park, which has a lovely playground. It's a great site, but it's definitely not a flat site. It's difficult to maintain. There is a ravine that kind of drops down on the backside of the property, and it's difficult to one use in different ways, and so the flexibility is not there, as well as the maintenance aspects and the things that you run into as far as invasive species and all the things that we're battling in some of our more challenged parks. So that is of concern for us, is the quality of the property that we are acquiring, as well as the size of the property and our ability to make it work to the best extent of the most users when we're programming these spaces. The outlying areas, we do have plans in place for Park Place, as well as South End, and the name's escaping me for the other plan that we have in place for the expanded areas of the city. They do have additional park and trail amenities that are suggested through those plans. The area of Park Place, which would include Holcomb, in the planning process did not have assigned green space in those areas. And so I think it would be advantageous of this group as we move forward in planning efforts, one, as a Parks and Recreation Master Plan moves forward at some point, and two, as the city is setting their comprehensive plan guidelines and looking at planning documents for how we will grow, that we're advocating for appropriate trails and green space allocations in communities, because we can only exact from developers typically what is already in the plan for development. So Park Place does have 2 parks that are called out in the planning. One, I believe, is 8 to 10 acres in size, something in that range, and the other one is in 3 to 4 acres in size. They're unfortunately not in the areas that are currently being developed. They're kind of on the outskirts in the center section, a little further south of where all of the development is currently happening. So I definitely preaching to the choir as far as staff is concerned, and those are conversations that we've had behind the scenes as far as ways to approach acquiring property in a way that makes sense and balancing the needs of residents that are already here and maybe don't have a park with the ability to land bank and find future growth opportunities, because land's not going to be cheaper than it is in the current market. And it's only going to be more and more expensive as we move forward. So trying to acquire those pieces, one that maybe are not as desirable currently for development because they don't have the utilities and services already linked to them, and two, that we know that we're going to be growing into at some point, which would make sense for us to acquire property.
Doug?
It must be about 13 or 14 years ago, the ballot measure was put out to sell the pocket parks. It failed, and I think there are probably lots of reasons. One is probably somebody's got a pocket park near you everywhere. But another reason was, I think, the argument was they're difficult to maintain and so forth. I think if we would look at a strategy where we actually say the monies that would be driving the sale will be used to buy some land or to build infrastructure on another park or something. So it's just not a case of thinking, well, let's just go into the parks budget and we don't know how it's going. If in fact, some kind of action like that. Every once in a while I drive by Dement Park and I can't understand why we own this the size of a house lot and there's nothing really on it to speak
Parky's
of.
another one.
But there's several of them around, and if we might want to think about putting a ballot title, but having a specific notion of how the proceeds from that sale would be used, that would make it more attractive in terms of the voter. Mm-hmm. And that was not, as far as I can recall, that was not done when that ballot measure went out.
Yeah, I would agree. It's difficult to take away someone's park when there are advocates for obviously even the smaller parks in our portfolio.
But one thing, the demographics of the city have changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of expansion in terms of our new voters coming in. They don't have a pocket park, they don't have any park, and so it might not be as much as an issue, especially if we can come up with a guarantee that those monies will be invested in
Dedicated
park
funding.
infrastructure, property acquisition, and not for services, and repair, and some of these other things.
Put it into potholes or something.
Not for building an office, right?
Our parks money shouldn't be going into the potholes.
So back to your original question of, do we want to make a recommendation to commission on the operations facility and the SDC funds? Mm-hmm. It sounds like as a group, we want to make a recommendation that they don't, or try to find a different means to fund that and use the SDC funds for property acquisition if possible, or focus those funds on that.
And I guess if maybe I'll allow other committee members to discuss that. Sorry, preemptive.
What does that mean that, does that mean that what happened stands and is going forward? Is that what we're talking about?
So I think Chris's recommendation would be that we support not spending SDC funds because we recognize that we have underserved areas within our community that would need to have those funds spent on property acquisition. And we have underserved areas of our community that have a need for a developed park where they currently have land but no developed park. And that the recommendation would be that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be that the city allocates funds from some other means beyond SDCs in order to provide an appropriate workplace for our park operations staff without using the funds that are so much needed for those other areas.
I had one more addition, and when I worked with City of Portland Parks, same problems, only on a much larger scale. Not a lot of money in parks out of the general fund. So what they did, of course, their priority was to bank for land. that helped in terms of having off-leash dog parks. If you couldn't develop it for a while, people would still go there to, right, so I mean, it got used, and there was soccer field or something, but anyway, the point was, is that we all know, whether it's a new park or whether it's an existing park, certainly in the historic parts of Oregon City, that they all need some help in terms of facility, playgrounds, or whether it's, you name the asset, but they all need, most of them anyway, need some more help in terms of getting those assets in place. And what City of Portland did is they went out for a bond measure to the city. And they, it was like a 5-year general obligation bond, and they listed what they were gonna do, and they made sure that they put those improvements throughout the city, so the whole city had a buy-in on a yes vote. And most of us can agree that we do want to see improvements in parks, especially if it's in our neighborhoods. And that was one option that worked for the city of Portland. They were able to build a community center, swimming pool, on the east side I'm speaking of now, on the southwest too. But anyway, the point was is that's how it ended up working for them. That the first priority was for land banking, while it was still available at a reasonable price, the acreage that they would need. And then secondly, they would do the general obligation bond.
Yeah, and I will say that the capital projects list and Parks and Recreation master plans do state that in order to fully fund many of the recommendations of those documents, that bonds, levies, or other resources, grants would need to be brought in to accomplish the build out. The SDCs are typically only a portion of providing the appropriate amount of service for each of those areas. So we, as with Glen Oak Park, applied for a grant, and that's the same that we have done for many of the new parks, is to pair the grant money with the SDC funds to build the park out. And we have not, I am unaware of any bonds that we have ever passed to provide services for Oregon City. But that is definitely one way that many communities use to fully support the needs of the community, is to pass a bond in order to provide the land banking and the park build out services. Tualatin Hills, Portland, Willamette Lane, Bend have all recently passed bonds in order to build out their communities and provide additional park space.
So what I'm seeing is SDCs were used to purchase the property next to the cemetery. And I understand the need for an operations center that's large enough to meet our current needs and then hopefully 20 years in the future. But now I'm looking at possibly a white elephant. If we've now purchased this property, but there's no funds to build an operations center that's adequate on that property, and we continue to work out of trailers until a bond is passed or the city commission finds a way of funding that facility without using additional SDC funds. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to see the city sitting on another piece of vacant property and not able to build. Mm-hmm. So, my question is, I understand completely where, and Mike opened up this question about the SDC funds are supposed to be used to buy park property, not an operations facility, to take care of all the park's properties. Well, then when you put it that way, it kind of does all come back around together, in that we need to have the operations facility in order to take care of what we have. So I don't want the recommendation to City Commission from PRAC to put a big hole in the city's ability to build an operations center. So just, having to look at it, being devil's advocate, coming from the other way. I understand when Mike first said it. When this first all came up, I said, what? They used SDCs to buy property to put on an operations center? And it didn't sound right. But then when you think further, deeper into it, yeah, it is still part of all the parks in Oregon City. So when we, if we make a recommendation to City Commission, and I heard, Chris going towards, making that recommendation that SDCs needs to be spent on property acquisition in underserved areas and not on building an operations facility.
Well, the way I worded it was to seek alternative funding to build the operations center. And if need be, if there's no other alternatives and we absolutely find that we do need to build that out, then yes, we could, recommend the SDC funds. But I think the focus of the SDC funds should be first and foremost property acquisition, as in land.
For parks.
For parks, future parks.
Right.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's some sort of compromise. Can the operations facility be phased in? Can we do portions?
Yeah, so that is going to be coming up on the next, and again, it's kind of bleeding into the next item. But the current, what was presented to commission was a two-phased approach, and we actually went back and have some information on a three-phased approach. The full build-out is close to $3 million for the full build-out. The first phase of that build-out is right around $1 million for direct construction costs. Again, the phasing could happen in 5 years, it could happen in 20 years. The phased approach would demolish the current office space and then build new office spaces as part of the newer construction operations pieces of the shop space. The current office space is an old home, and it's not configured appropriately for modern office work. Additionally, there's no dedicated conference space for grieving families, and it's not ADA compliant. And so we have many things working against us. But it does work, and it does serve its purpose. But eventually, we would need to probably at some point demolish and build appropriate spaces for staff. The third phase would be additional 5,000 feet of shop space that would be used for storing of equipment and supplies and housing additional staff.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Yeah. Okay.
And so I think my message that I've received, and again, maybe I will just reiterate what my assumptions of the group are, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that SDC should be used, that we've already used them for purchasing of the current property at the cemetery. And there's a recognition, I guess, from some members of the group that that seems to make sense. But that expending additional SDC funds, knowing that we have so many needs for those SDC funds, doesn't make sense to expend additional funds beyond what has already been spent on that property to further build out the park operations facility. If there are other means that can be found within the city to appropriately provide the size of space that the park operations staff need to provide the service to the community. So I would then bring forward to commission and to the city manager a recommendation of trying to right-size the facility to make sure that we're providing what the commission is looking for, and give the commission then options to choose from, either then if they are not willing to dedicate the appropriate funds to provide, and I guess this is maybe a request of this group, is some clarity of the next best option if they are not able to find additional funds to fully build out that facility is, do we replace like for like and maybe outgrow the facility in the next 5-10 years, or do we would we prefer at that point then to possibly use SDC funds to make sure that we have the appropriate size facility for staff?
I think, I agree. I think it's, maybe it's something we could bring up.
Doug,
What was-
I'm going to have you speak up again, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all
I'm away
right.
from the mic. Excuse me. What was the most recent acquisition of parkland that we made? Do you know?
Probably Filbert Run and Glen Oak, I would assume. I don't know that for a fact, but I
Yeah, I think
can.
that's right, probably. I mean, I guess I'd make the argument a bit stronger that we, in fact, are not keeping up with our growth in the population in terms of providing parkland. And to actually indicate that the board feels that other sources need to be used for the operations facility, and that we identified as one of our greatest concerns, not securing more parkland as our city's growing.
Okay.
I make that as a fairly strong recommendation from us. Excuse me, make that as a very strong.
There you go. I was going to amend
That is a
that.
very strong recommendation for us.
So my question before was, so does this, what happened stand? And then going forward, where the recommendation is that from now on, we prefer to have this, is that what
Yeah.
we're doing?
Well, they've already made they already made the purchase.
It's already spent.
We can't
Well-
reverse that, but yes,
Oh.
yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I mean, I was at the meeting where it was brought up, no, what you're doing is not enough, and to make that, but I don't know if we were ever brought into the discussion. Board?
Yeah, so at that point, we had brought the board into discussion on the need that was there, and as we went through
Yes.
the budgeting process, but yeah, the
But in terms
larger,
of the purchase of the other property and so
Yeah.
forth, I don't think we were ever involved, to my knowledge, in that process. I just happened to be at the commission meeting when one of the
Yeah.
commissioners brought that up.
yeah, and I have dedicated at the October meeting, we did discuss that, and in moving into the future, there are some nuances with the negotiation process of property and needing to have things happen in executive session for property acquisition. But I will, if that is an opportunity moving forward, I will, between now and that point, discuss with our city attorney what way to appropriately involve this group in a way that does not impact negatively our ability to acquire property at a reasonable rate. Because that often is, a city government attempting to purchase property can sometimes skew the bargaining power when you're trying to acquire said property. So that is, yeah, I very much appreciate that, and we'll make sure that there is more involvement moving forward in whatever form that takes.
So any further discussion on the park SDCs? We move on to the operations facility. Is that where we need to make any motion, or does the motion need to come under?
So I think what I would suggest is that we have, probably have a vote by a motion, what the recommendation from this group would be. And then for the park operations facility piece, more of just a update to this group. We will be going back with this recommendation to the city commission on January 9th to make a recommendation on how to appropriately either size or fund the facility and give them options of our recommendation, and then hopefully have some direction from them moving forward. So whatever the decision is of this group, I would also ask that maybe there would be representation from this group at that commission meeting in order to show support for that decision. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion then that our committee recommends that SDCs are not used to build the operations facility because we feel that they're better served to buy additional park property, and that the city look at other funds to actually build the park's operation facility.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Roger has a
Well,
question.
I don't know, is that the proper way to, because they've already spent this money.
No, this is for the
forward.
building of the facility.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, this is future.
okay, so, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So to confirm just the Roger's question, so we have, again, $650,000 dedicated in general fund support for the build out of this facility. The requested SDCs would probably be, again, somewhere in the $300,000 to $350,000 area. And then we would also account for the soft costs within the construction phase within our currently allocated budget is most likely the recommendation that would have gone forward. So with that, we can definitely move forward, and again, just for clarity, for a next best option, again, before we move into the vote, the second option would be we then shrink the size of the facility to the size of budget that we would have if we're not successful in advocating for additional funds through commission.
I know why you're saying that.
Yeah,
That's not the motion.
Okay, yeah, just being clear, yes.
Okay.
I mean,
But shouldn't,
they're going to have the dialogue themselves. I mean,
Okay.
so we're simply making a strong recommendation of how we feel the SDC money should be used.
Fair enough.
but shouldn't
I
it be
can
a
appreciate that.
broader statement though, than you're referring to what just happened in your motion?
No,
No.
We're talking about
This is
going
This is the
forward.
building of the facility
Okay,
itself.
obviously I should just vote.
Yeah, this isn't, I mean, the land is purchased and that's done. That's not.
So
an
sorry to
issue.
take you sideways, Doug,
Yeah.
But going
I appreciate
forward,
the clarity.
I guess what I'm saying is that the wording should be capital structures, or how would you term it versus what you term?
I think the
I said the building of
delineation
the
would
facility.
be for, what I heard through the conversation was an emphasis on land banking and property acquisition, secondary emphasis on building out of park facilities. and,
Assets. To the, assets to the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then third, I guess there wouldn't be really a third. So we have property acquisition and property build out.
And not an operations facility.
Correct.
Well, when you say property build up, that, to me, that limits, I don't know, where my mind goes is that limits you to park facilities and structures within a park, not just your operations center.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
intent
Yeah.
in the motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah, that's my intent in the motion.
Okay, I see it now.
Okay, so Doug made the motion, and is it clear?
So Doug
Mike?
made the
Mike, are
motion,
you
Mike seconded, and
clear on?
we had discussion. Unless there's further discussion, we can take
We
a
can call a
vote.
question, take a vote.
Okay, so roll call, I will ask Commissioner Daniel, or Committee Member Daniels,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Gifford,
Abstain.
Neely,
Aye.
Novak,
Aye.
Fowler Theis.
Aye.
So I have 7 aye and 1 abstain. Do we have 6? 1, 2.
Must be 6. 6 and 1.
You're right. Thank you. Sorry. Obviously need to, I forgot that Sean was not here tonight, so 7 and 1. Great.
thought he was
Or
counting
6 and
blame.
1, excuse me.
And I'll be
you very
more
much.
than happy if I'm around to come to that city commission meeting.
Yeah, and I think it bodes very well to see the support of the committee when there are decisions like that that are being made, and I'm sure there will be much discussion amongst the commission at that meeting.
And it's January 9th.
Correct. Yeah. And they don't typically take public comments during the work sessions, but often Mayor Holliday will pull individuals that have direct connection to the decision process forward to give comment. So whether it is Chair Gifford, who is on her way out, or some other representative of this group to maybe come forward and speak to the commission on that. Were there, so as far as the park SDCs, and again, I know we blended into the park operations facility, but were there other questions or concerns in relation to the park operations facility before I move forward to present to commission on the 9th? Great. Thank you.
Okay, are we moving on to 6D? Or did you have more information on the operations facility for us?
No, I'll go ahead and move forward on
Okay,
that.
on the McLaughlin-Kanina Trail.
Yeah, so the McLaughlin-Kanema Trail, the project manager, Kelly Reed, came to make a presentation at the September meeting and went forward to the planning commission last month. And there was some concern that there was not a consensus on how to move forward after the presentation. And so the request of the commission was to have Kelly and the advisory committee reconvene. And so the advisory committee will be reconvening next week on the 14th. To clarify their vision and to further discuss the recommendations of the report that was created through the process. After that advisory committee meeting, she will be coming back to PRAC to make a presentation and to ask for a formal recommendation of this group. And then also going to TAC during the month of January, and then back to the Planning Commission during the month of February. So we will be seeing a presentation in January after the advisory committee meets. And all the project information is currently on the website. So if you would like a refresher or if you'd like to provide any feedback to that group, I believe Lisa's on that group. So you can feel free to communicate with Lisa or send comments to me, and we can bring those forward. And then obviously bring information back. Lisa, is there anything else that I'm?
No, I think you captured everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was at the meeting where it was presented to the commission, and there was, the feeling was that it looked like it was a two-stage process for their development and so forth, and they were running the trail on the land side as opposed to the river side of McLaughlin Boulevard, and that something else would happen in the future. I think there was a strong sentiment that we want to get the trail built the way it should be built. There was also the VFW were very concerned about changing a route to get to the parking lot there.
Yeah. And we did have a meeting with the VFW and leadership there, and they are supportive of looking at alternatives. And one of the recommendations from them, and something that will probably be built out into the alignment plan, is that we just soften the language a little bit on how the vehicular traffic accesses the parking lot versus how the bike ped accesses for the trail alignment. So the current plan, as it states, is a little bit more rigid than I think the intended conversation happened during the advisory committee, which was, hey, maybe we can look at options to bring the vehicular traffic off of High Street. There's going to be a lot of work that will be required to build out the driveway area, has some constraints with some rock outcroppings and drop-offs on the other side that would be fairly costly, and that there would also be some fairly costly engineering that would need to happen coming off of High Street as well, and that if we're going to have to spend money for one of those two options, it might make sense to separate vehicles from cars and people for that transportation option. So again, some flexibility. I think adding in some of that language would make the plan a little bit more acceptable for the VFW, and they seem to support that moving forward. And they'll have recommendation from their president. I believe that's their appointed position. I wish Sean was here. Their grand poobah, their president of the commander, thank you, of the VFW will be present for the advisory committee and able to voice the conversation that happened at that meeting.
Okay. So if you have any questions on that, make sure you let Lisa know.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Ermatinger House.
So this was a request at the last meeting that we have this as a standing item. So this is here as a standing item. Not much to report. We have been having side conversations with the Friends Group for operations of the facility there. Our intent still is to have the Ermatinger House open and operational in some capacity for this next coming tourist season. So sometime before summer, having the facility available in some capacity, whether it's at full staffing support or on a limited basis, at some form opening up the house for tours and visits from the general community. We have been moving forward with the furniture plan. So we have a dedicated architectural historian that has been helping us with piece selections and is all of the tracking that needs to happen for those pieces. So much to come, but excited for what can be as well.
So no plans for any holiday opening?
Not at this point,
time.
unfortunately.
Okay. All right. McLaughlin Promenade project proposal?
Yes, so this came forward. We had some discussion. Bill Daniels brought this forward at the last meeting, and since then we've had some conversations both as at the staff level between Public Works and Parks, as well as we had a meeting Monday night. Bill, myself, John Lewis, ODOT representatives, and Jerry Herman were there to discuss the proposition by Bill and Jerry to do some site improvements at the promenade. With that, maybe I'll turn it over to Bill to expand on a little bit.
Originally, I had brought it before this group that there's a possibility that McLaughlin Neighborhood Association might want to forward a proposal to the Metro Enhancement Grant Committee for an application that we could perhaps improve the landscaping on the bluff side of the stone wall. And of course, that's a dynamic project, and there's a lot of variables. And as we did in fact, Roger was with us also as part of that tour that Jerry Herman and Brian Boyce and a couple of other neighbors were involved in suggestions about what we should be looking at as far as the elimination of some of the non-native vegetation and how to control the weeds, and then how to perhaps re-landscape with something that's drought tolerant, would take no landscaping to speak of, maybe California poppies, allowing them to go to seed. But all of that would play into this proposal that we'd try to write up for the spring, for the Metro Enhancement Grant. And as it turned out, coincidentally, John Lewis, Public Works, one of his staff folks had received a letter from ODOT. And am I stepping on anything you want to talk about?
No, please feel free.
And so ODOT apparently is going to be doing a tree removal mitigation project up on the bluff starting the end of this month or as soon as possible in January. They have to get it completed by March 1st because of some federal laws about bird nesting habitats. And so that was a coincidence. And so we found out about this at the 11th hour, and we asked John Lewis when they would be meeting with the ODOT representatives, that we could be included on that meeting along with Phil. Of course, I mean, that was what John wanted to see happen was Parks is going to be impacted by this as well as they approach to get their equipment over to the side of that stone wall to be able to do the removal. And apparently the two ladies that were at the meeting laid out the scope of what their proposals were, and apparently the bids that came in for them were 3 times what they expected. So they had to step back and regroup and figure out how they were going to either redo the bid or accept the fact that it is going to be a more expensive project. And what basically is going to happen, as I understand it, is that they will remove all or most of all trees that are growing along the bluff between the railing and the bluff, the stone wall and the bluff, because of the geologists are concerned about the rock fracturing. And there's actually 3 project phases. And the 2 of the phases are in Kanema, below the Kanema bluffs, as well as another smaller. They're going to be actually removing fabric fencing to get back and to do some rescaling of the knocking off loose rock and then putting either new fabric or the existing fabric back on the netting. But on project, the largest project, which affects the McLaughlin Promenade, it goes from the VFW hall, roughly, to where 99 curves and heads out towards the Willamette River. So it's approximately where the flagpole's at on the bluff. And so that scope of work is something we'd be interested in trying to see if we could get some help or essentially find out what they could do for us or what they plan on doing for themselves, so that when we're trying to establish a scope of work to get an idea how much money we could ask for from the Metro Enhancement Grant, the information was that they will be doing a fair amount of spraying. After they've made their cuts, they're going to basil spray the stumps so that they don't re-blossom and actually just die. They'll cut them to the, basically to the ground level, and they'll actually be working all the way down the cliff, scale and off of ropes or however they're going to do it with lifts. ODOT was not in a position to tell the contractors how they were going to get the work done, this is what we need to pay to have it done. Means and methods, I think, is what she used. But the point is that we found out that we possibly could get some help from ODOT that's already existing in their plans about spraying some of the Scotch broom, which is starting to come back again. It's invasive and needs to be cut. A chainsaw works just as well as a bladed instrument and then have it sprayed as well so it wouldn't come back for years to come, and removal of hopefully English ivy, which is also growing on that part of the bluff. And we're waiting for a response whether they're going to be able to accommodate some of what we're asking for while they're in there doing this, what they can do for us, and then we'll know better what we need to try to ask for money from Metro Enhancement. Of course, as we all probably know, that there's still another portion of that bluff from the flagpole all the way through to the elevator that also needs that similar kind of help. That's not their scope of work, though. They're not going that far. And of course, now we've got another added issue about the railroad below that area. So it's all going to be a delicate proposition.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. So there will be some impact to the promenade during that time. They might need to tie off, for example, on the upper section. They said most likely the only tie-off point would be at the VFW parking lot, which would, on those days, they would need to close and do a detour for the bikes and pedestrians that would typically be on the promenade. Their work should be done before the weather really turns and would have a higher impact. So that is one nice point. We did point out during the meeting that there would be concerns with ADA accessibility and folks pushing strollers, things like that, as there aren't many connection points that have a full solid surface pathway leading to High Street and back down to the promenade. So they took that information and will be going forward to make sure they have a full detour route that is appropriate for folks to be able to use as much as possible. All of the other work will be happening from the lower section and bringing down the debris down onto 99. So it should have minimal impact on park users, but will have a pretty substantial impact on vehicles as they attempt to do their commute. So if you're interested in a full update and what they're planning, I would recommend you go back and watch the video from the CIC meeting on Monday evening. Pretty substantial, and they went through the full project and pretty easy to follow that way. But any information as we receive it as far as impacts on the park, we'll definitely keep folks up to date on that end.
The project itself, they're going to try to finish by mid-August, I remember, and they're going to be actually putting bolts into the rock that was done most recently in 1995 when they put that fabric netting on the promenade itself. Mm-hmm. And I recall that they were going to try to finish by mid-August, and they're also doing the tunnel. So there's going to be some huge traffic concerns about detour routes for several months. Sometimes it'll be 20-minute detours, and other times all day.
Closures.
Right, closures. And sometimes all day, 24-hour closures because of the tunnel work.
And they said they would finish they would hope to finish the northern section first, and because of the impact for the Clackamas County Fair, I believe it was, and then going into the school season, and that there might be some additional work further south that may take them into closer to October, I believe. So.
And then the rest of the bluff, whether it's city property or Burlington Northern?
Yeah, so that was one of the conversations we had, was the northern section of the bluff, and as it relates to Bill and Jerry Herman's proposed project, is that the railroad would probably have a pretty large stake in what happens up there, and maybe we can reach out and say, hey, this obviously is a concern in the southern section for ODOT. We're assuming it would probably be a concern for the railroad in the northern section. Maybe somebody could come out and take a look, which would then allow the proposal to not be as substantial for the enhancement grant options. Because it will be, I think the ODOT folks are saying it was something like $1,000 a day just for flagging for the railroad section. So it would be a pretty costly endeavor and would rack up pretty quickly.
Okay. Something else that needs to be done.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have any other questions for Bill on that? We look forward to seeing more reports on that. I'll get to watch you guys discuss that. Thank you very much. All right. Election of officers and timetable discussion.
So as you're aware, our fantastic chair, Joyce, will be leaving us at the end of this year. With that, and with all years, we have a discussion at the first meeting in January to decide who should be our chair and vice chair for the year. So this is just a reminder to the group that come January, we will have a discussion, hopeful recommendation of a chair and vice chair moving forward. So as a reminder, Joyce is our chair and Chris is our vice chair. And one of our points moving forward is, again, we'll have to have those positions filled. So just be thinking about that, or if you have interest, or if you think someone else on the board is well suited to fill one of those positions, be thinking of that going into January.
All right, moving on. Member position openings, appointment recommendations.
I'm going to recuse myself.
So as a reminder, I won't get into any of the dirt until Doug's gone, but as a reminder, this is, we have 3 vacant positions. We had 4 applicants at the work session earlier this evening to fill the 3 vacant positions, of which Doug is applying for reappointment of his current position. And with that, I will open it up to discussion for the group.
So
We have-
just a quick question before we get into the discussion. Can I assume that we're not going to run afoul of our bylaws and more than 2 from a neighborhood association?
Correct, yeah, we have
With
no
any of them?
conflicts with any of the
No conflicts?
the current applicants and
Okay.
any of the current members of the committee.
Great.
Troy is from McLaughlin, Karen is from Rivercrest, Jeremiah is from outside the city, and we can have 1 outside member that had previous.
There's no limit on the number. I just looked at the bylaws.
Yeah. that doesn't
Really?
last,
Okay,
yeah.
outside the city, and then Doug, who's in, is he in South Bend? Or Hazel Grove? Hazel Grove.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
So I'll start. Just my, I think obviously Doug, we want to retain.
Yes.
Yep.
Lots of great history there, knowledge. I think my second recommendation would be Karen. I mean, she obviously has some passion around the parks, and especially the history. I think that brings a great perspective to the group. And then Jeremiah, just because I think just his, again, you know, he brought up the demographic background. You know, he's younger, brings that kind of outside perspective. Doesn't have a lot of knowledge or history around city parks. But of course, neither did I, being fairly new to the city too when I first started. But I think he brings that fresh set of eyes and ears to the group. He's very articulate. It seems like he's a very strategic thinker, methodical. He brought up, but I think he's very. He can make a great addition to the group.
Okay, any other opinions?
I do.
Okay, Lisa.
In this order, Doug, Troy, and Jeremiah. And here's why. Doug, obviously for his experience and his commitment to crack. Troy, I thought that he would bring a lot of passion, and I really like the volunteerism with the Boy Scouts and what he's been putting into that, and I think that that would be a very nice fit. I think he would be very passionate advocate for crack. He has the type of personality, extrovert, and I think that would be a benefit in bringing our voice to the people. And Jeremiah, similar to Chris, outside perspective, methodical thinker, kind of think I'm like that as well. I absorb, I learn, and then I form my opinions. And also the demographic. So I agree, I'm in agreement with Chris. So those are my recommendations.
Bill or Mike?
Yeah, go ahead. You want to go ahead?
No, you go ahead.
I'll be brief. I thought we had 4 excellent candidates. And I remember that Troy, of course, and Jeremiah were both interested in interviewing for planning, which is a huge responsibility and a lot of homework. So I'm hoping that either one of those who we may not choose works its way into getting that planning position. But I I think I would prefer to have Troy and Karen and Doug would be my picks.
Nobody's agreed completely so far, so
I-
let's go with Mike.
I think 1, 2, 3 for me would be Doug, Karen, Troy. And Troy and Jeremiah is really close. And what I'm thinking, and Bill just brought up a good point. And I don't, this is probably not something we can do, but if we choose to recommend the same person that ends up getting on the planning commission, we're going to have another opening, because the planning commission's a killer by itself, I think. But I don't know of a way that we could make a recommendation that says, go with every one of these that doesn't.
I think there can be a recognition that we have some folks that are applying for some other committees that is ultimately the mayor makes the appointment. So the recommendation I can put forward to the city recorder that, this was what we selected. There was a recognition that if this is the direction we move, that both of these individuals would be a good fit. But the burden of serving on those two committees might be too much. And
So we'd have a backup.
yeah, so we can offer a 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can say this is where we sit, and they may, reach back out to the individuals applying after the fact and say, hey, are you able to do both these committees? What's your preference? And so that was kind of why I had asked Troy that question at the beginning was, if you're applying for that many of the different committees, do you have a preference?
Especially as a single dad.
Do we know if they've interviewed for the planning?
I'm not sure. Yeah, not positive.
I mean, so that makes it easy, and we're choosing all of them, and we'll let the city,
Well, we do
Well, I
need
think we have
to,
no, I know.
We have to put some priorities.
yes, yes. Okay. I understand in a way where Lisa is coming from in that she did not ask for Karen. Karen is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the history of Oregon City. And, her position as on the Friends of Mountain View Cemetery, in a way kind of goes hand in hand with what PrAC is doing. But is she too focused on that and not more on the parks in general? So, we need to have a balance. So that would be my only concern, with Karen. Thank you for stepping up for Jeremiah, because I thought, gosh, this young man didn't do his homework when he didn't know the difference between the two Kenema parks. But it is true that when you're new to the area, but he does have a passion and spends time in the parks. And, that's obviously an important consideration. So, I don't know how I would vote for them, besides Doug is right up there, number 1.
So just for clarity, really quick maybe for Bill, because I'm not sure that I got them in your preferred order. You listed the 3 that you chose, but you listed in the order that you said them, Karen, Troy, and Doug. Do you have a preference in first, second, third in that grouping at all?
Probably Doug, he has a fair amount of experience.
Okay.
And then, of course, Karen and Troy.
Okay. Thank you. Not sure if it'll be helpful when we get down to it, but I'm trying to make note of folks as they said their first, second, third choices.
I've heard from Roger.
So Doug, I think, is number 1 on everybody's list. Okay, so that's the easy shoe to fill.
Consensus.
So thus far, so Roger, do you have a?
Well, Doug, definitely. I guess I would go with Karen and Jeremiah.
So 4 Jeremiahs.
Yeah, so we have, so Doug's, it seems like
I have 3
consensus.
Oh, you.
Second, we had Lisa with Troy, Chris with Karen, Mike with Karen, and Roger with Karen. Jeremiah, and Bill with Karen. Third, Lisa with Jeremiah, Chris with Jeremiah, Bill with Troy, Mike with Troy, and Roger with Jeremiah. Let me see if, just counting, Troy,
I have Doug,
2,
Karen.
3, Jeremiah 1, 2,
I have a tie between Jeremiah and
3,
Troy on my,
Karen 1, 2, 3, 4.
Jeremiah and who?
So I have Karen on here 4 times, Troy and Jeremiah both on here 3 times. And Joyce has only listed 1 selection thus far.
yep.
And it looks like she's not going to say.
I think I would switch mine from Karen to Troy. So it'd be Doug, Jeremiah, Troy.
Well, that just makes everything
Based-
even more even. That just
sorry.
makes it all three.
Just based on,
three.
well, I'm basing that on some of the feedback I heard too. So sorry.
Oh, goodness.
Flip a coin.
Well,
What's the
You know,
lineup look
it's-
like? I didn't hear the tally.
It's about even.
it's actually 3, they've all got 3 votes, besides Doug, who has 7. In that, both Troy and Jeremiah, there's a possibility one or the other, or even both, might be on planning.
Then we'd
I
be
don't
looking for
know.
another candidate.
How many applied for that?
7.
7 for how many positions?
4 open.
4 positions. Okay, so there's a possibility in either of them. Wow. I don't know. We need Doug to come back in here and say who he wants.
But he wasn't.
Yeah, you
He wasn't
didn't
here
hear
for
that.
that, yeah.
He wasn't here. Wow.
Well, can he vote at all? I mean,
What?
Well, he didn't
Well, he
hear.
wasn't here for the interviews.
He wasn't here for the
so
interviews.
Make it difficult for him.
Does staff ever make a tiebreaker decision in this committee?
I don't think so. I don't know that there's anything against it in our bylaws, but
Coin toss?
well, that sounds like the easiest way.
Done before. It's really just, it's really tied up between the other
Well,
3.
I do want to say, though, that Sean really recommended Troy and has worked with him on the school budget committee.
Oh,
yeah.
So that gives another vote for Troy, just,
He has been a resident here longer.
although he is in your neighborhood.
I think they all bring something different and unique to the position that would be beneficial to this group. Karen's history and involvement in the cemetery, which is a fairly large component of our department. Jeremiah's, kind of outsider experience, and although he's not a tax-paying member of the group, he is representative of many members of our community that don't live within the city boundaries. And Troy, who, has a vested interest in the community, has been here a while and has that experience with being fairly involved with a lot of different committees and seemingly knowing people in the community. And so, yeah, not an easy decision.
Could I amend my ranking?
Anytime,
anytime
yes.
before the vote.
I would rank Doug first. Troy second, Karen third.
And I'm going to agree with that, and hope that if Troy gets on Planning Commission, he steps aside and lets Jeremiah come and join us, even though we are the Fun Committee. There's still work to be done on this committee, but Planning Commission is much harder work. I think Troy has a lot of skills for that.
Well, I appreciate all of them coming forward and taking the time to do this, and it's, I know when I went through this, you know, it's, at least it's just nice to be heard and tell folks why you think you can help the community in any way that's a strong point for themselves.
So did we arrive at something?
On the amended version,
I'm just double checking my numbers. We have Doug with 6 votes, which is the most you could get. Troy with 4, Karen with 4, and Jeremiah with 3.
Correct. That's what I also have.
So unless there's further discussion, it looks like we have Doug, Troy, and Karen as the 3 that would be recommended, and we would put a ranked order. It sounds like that's kind of the order that folks felt comfortable with. Again, I think more so in just recognizing that Jeremiah would be an excellent addition to this group. If there's other opportunities that might pull another of our folks off of this group once the final selection's made. So with that, maybe if Joyce wants to open it up for a vote.
All right.
Do we have a first and second for said, or do we need to?
Oh, do we need to,
I think we need to do it by motion.
need to make a
Yeah.
motion? Okay, so the motion, all right, in the order that Phil stated was Doug, Troy, Karen, and Jeremiah?
I move to
So
make a
moved.
motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's moved by Bill and seconded by Mike.
Chris.
Oh, well, it was a
other
voice that
Mike.
came from this direction on me, and I wasn't watching the lips move. Chris, okay, thank you very much for correcting me on that. Any further discussion? And call the vote.
Okay, so vote Daniels,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Gifford,
Aye.
Novak,
Aye.
Fowler Thias,
Aye.
and it passes.
Let's call Doug back in.
Yeah, tell Doug he can come back. Probably thought we forgot.
And tell him he's chair. Right.
He went home.
He's eating
Done with
pizza.
you guys.
I was feasting.
Are you sure you're ready to come back?
We know his true motives.
Okay, other general business.
I do have a couple of items on my end, unless there's other items that the committee would like to bring up first. Okay, so my main item is the Willamette Falls Legacy Project Master Plan is currently open to receive comments. So if you have had a chance to look through the document, it's currently on the Metro's website, and I can forward the link to everyone for this group. It's open until December 13th. The planning group will be making a presentation to the City Commission coming up next week on the 12th. So if you're interested and available to attend the presentation, again, just going through and memorializing the process that has happened. Not a lot of new information, but kind of just talking through the master plan document It will go forward to Metro Council in January 4th, for adoption through Metro. And we will be seen as our group will receive a presentation from the planning group at our January meeting to make a recommendation to move forward to the City Commission for adoption by resolution of the master plan, recognizing the work that has happened. So we would see a presentation in January, and then the commission would see a resolution come forward to them in February for adoption.
So you have 2 presentations in January, just keeping track.
Mm-hmm.
All right, at least 2, all right.
And the other items I'll talk about under the staff report section.
All right. Member reports. Go ahead.
Right, thank you. Pioneer Center updates, trip registration open, and we have most of the trips either full or close to full. The Parks Department has been cleaning up around the grounds and planted some new plants in front of the flagpoles. We have some trees that will be arriving soon to replace the pine trees that were removed on the east side of the building. The audit for nutrition program was completed and there were no concerns noted. Health inspection was completed 100% with no violations.
Wow.
The giving tree was completed and all tags were taken within the first week. I'm going to report on the Parks Foundation. Our bottle drop fundraising probably will be coming very close to $5,000 for the year.
That's great.
We cleaned up, we had 4 park cleanup events started as of May 6th. 2 at Waterboard Park with ivy poles, an old Camino Park ivy pole, and working with the trail going through there. And a Promenade Park cleanup where we're planting a drought-tolerant garden, and 99 plants were planted, and with the remaining 300 to be planted this coming spring. We ended up with over 100 plus volunteers, and I haven't really finished counting how many hours, but I came to 350 hours of volunteer work. And I think that's pretty good for like 6 months, but that's when we started. January 20th will be, the Parks Foundation will be holding a silent auction fundraising event at the Hive Tap House on 13851 Beaver Creek Road. And the food and drinks will be $1 from each of those items will go toward the fundraising, along with, of course, the silent auctions. And all money will, of course, go to the parks. So I hope you keep that in mind, and we'll send a reminder.
What date is it again?
Excuse me?
What date is it again?
The 20th
Saturday, January
of
20th.
January. And if you haven't been to the Hive Tap, it's a pretty nice place. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Lisa?
Okay. As usual, busy visiting our parks, making the circuit. I don't have any significant items to notate, just enjoying our parks, enjoying the weather, the drier weather, so that's been helpful. A couple of ivy pulls, working on Waterboard Park, October 28th. We had an event, and that turned out really well. Doing some mini ivy pulls. We'll be out there again this Sunday, so just a small group of us.
At Waterboard? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so very informal, so if anybody wants to join us, more than welcome to. A little bit off topic, but somehow pertinent. Today, I was recertified in Red Cross first aid training, including CPR, bloodborne pathogens, and first aid. And what I would, if anyone has not been through this, it's a one-day course. And it's really helpful. You can do this on your own through the Red Cross, and really it could save someone's life. It's, so it's worth doing if you have never attended that type of training before. So that's all I've got.
Doug?
Some time ago, the Natural Resource Committee, one of the things that they wanted to see happen was stream signage occurring in the city. And it's been put forward as one of the goals that we're looking for funding in the next budget go around for that purpose. However, and they outlined priority streams, and I'm on the on the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, and they decided that they would actually put up some signs, make some signs for stream crossings for the ones that we had identified. They had an OWEB grant, Oregon Water Enhancement Board grant. These are monies that come in from the lottery, and part of it could be used for educational purposes, and they checked, and in fact, it could be used for signage. The signs have been made.
I'll do a little visual aid for you.
And had
Oh, nice.
so these are going to be put up. Public Works is putting them up, installing them for us. So, but we don't expect the Watershed Council to do all the signage on the streams. But we thought this would be a first start in that process.
That's great.
All right, Chris?
I don't have anything to report at this time.
Mike?
Couple of things. At Monday night CIC meeting, they do a roundtable at the end, kind of like what we're doing now, and 3 different neighborhood associations pointed out that issues related to the parking lot at the top of Waterboard Park,
Promontory Point.
it came up at 3 different neighborhood associations, and there's not even 3 neighborhood associations all that close to there, but apparently it's becoming enough of an issue.
It borders 2 of them.
Yeah, but it came up at a 3rd one also.
Yep.
Anyway, so I thought this group should know that there's ongoing serious issues, it sounds like.
What kind of issues?
Vandalism, drinking, garbage,
Drug use.
drug use,
Yeah, profanity, just
obnoxious,
really
whatever.
in your face, kind of when you ask them politely to move on. Yeah,
Yeah.
the
I've
police
seen
are
it.
well aware of the problems,
Yeah,
but
so
still,
that's one thing.
they're all the time.
The other thing, I just really wish there was video. When I looked through the reports and I see teenager had to be cut out of toddler swing at Barkley Hills Park by fire department. God, I wish there was film of that.
Shaming.
Yeah.
Our parks guys were not too happy about that.
I just thought that was hilarious. And then the other thing, I guess, is a question, Phil, whether it makes sense now or when you talk about recreation reports. I did just do a little something with the numbers that Denise was kind enough to provide.
Oh,
I don't know if it makes sense in my report or
Yeah, now it's fine,
later.
or-
Okay, all right. Here, just grab one of these, and it's just, it's the kind of stuff that I do all day and I've done for 40 years. So all I did was took the monthly numbers that she provided, some of the ones that looked like they were a little more important, and compared last year through October through this year through October, just to see if there's any kind of trends. So like pool visits off a little bit, pool facility rentals off a little bit, Pioneer Center, kind of a mixed bag. The interesting thing, and I hope this isn't true, but the cemetery numbers are way up. So I hope it isn't that our pool and Pioneer Center customers are becoming cemetery customers. But anyway, for what it's worth. Some of these numbers are up nicely and more income. Like, look at, RV dump has made us another, $23,000 year to date compared to during the same period of time
Well,
last
that's because it was closed
year.
a lot last year because of the flooding.
Well, yeah, a couple of months there. January and February, looks like. But look at June, it was open last year in June, wasn't it? $5,500, and this year, $17,000. Anyway, and please pass on my thanks to Denise for and Rochelle for taking the time to put those numbers
Oh,
together.
I will, definitely.
That's it.
Bill?
I have none.
Okay. So participating with the Parks Foundation in the ivy poles and the general cleanups. So the Parks Foundation is trying to make a decision about how we're going to be going forward. And so if you want to get more involved in that, please talk to Roger, Lisa, or myself, but we hope to see everybody out at the January 20th auction at the Hive. It's going to start at 6 p.m. There'll be silent auction baskets, possibly some live auction things to bid on. And if you have something that you would like to donate for the silent auction or the live auction, please let one of us know, because this is all going directly into the parks. We're going to be thinking about how the funds, the $5,000, how we're going to be spending that. But right now we're putting our energy into invasive species removal, because we need to get the invasives gone before we can start planting the native plants that need to happen. And that's going to, be happening in all our parks. So keep an eye out for where those need to happen. And we're still looking for additional movement, of course, down in Newell Creek Canyon. They've had several work crews down there cleaning out more garbage all the time. But because it hasn't really gotten cold enough yet, we still do have a lot of canyon dwellers that pass our house every day. And that's going to continue to be a concern, I think, even when the trails are in. So homelessness, or I guess there's a new term for it. What is that?
Houselessness?
Houselessness.
Really?
Okay, being a concern. So keep that in mind. But on a brighter note, my dog loves our parks. And there's lots of great movement down at the Cove. If you haven't had a chance to walk the Cove Trail, I recommend that you do that. The path has been rerouted in some areas. You can see the construction that's been happening down there. There's a parking lot now that you can actually, park your car in safely instead of just the 4 little stalls that used to be there. So take a walk on the Cove next nice day.
Great. And they are going into the pre-app process for the Cove Phase 2 and 3 development as well. So that's something that they're hoping to, I think they said they would like to start construction this next coming construction season, which seems very,
Ambitious?
yeah.
Optimistic.
We'll see what comes of it, but yeah.
But given
They're
that's
hoping
been
for 2018.
but given that's been about a 16-year project as it is,
Yeah. Okay, staff report.
So you all received the recreation reports from Denise. I'm going to go over a couple of other things that have come up since then. Some of them might have been included in some of the communications as well. First thing is the pool is hosting an open house for the community on January 5th, Friday, January 5th. Everyone who attends, it's totally free. They're doing tours and free swimming and doing some other prizes and refreshments. Everyone who attends gets 15% off of memberships and punch cards if you do so at the event. So great reason to start your New Year's resolution and getting in shape and getting healthy. Another thing to note is I did not have a chance to present this to the group in our October meeting. It came to me from staff after that point, so I do apologize. This it's something we typically would bring forward first, but we will be going to the City Commission work session coming up next week to present some thoughts on special events and shelter rates. So the staff has, as we're going into what is typically our season for starting folks to do reservations for our parks and shelters. We've had some different events that have come forward, and we're not really keeping pace with kind of the costs of providing the service for these different events and groups. Shelter rates are positioned to stay the same as they have, or as they currently are. The special event rates are going to be going up a little bit, and so typical reservation rates for special events would have a special events fee tied to it. We currently don't have a special events fee, and so just kind of right sizing the staff and materials and workload that's associated with an event that draws 1,000 people or 2,000 people, as opposed to a typical shelter reservation for 50 people or 100 people. So we'll be bringing that forward. All the materials are online, and I can definitely forward them to this group as well. Most of the reservations would have somewhat minimal impact. We're actually decreasing the rate that we currently charge for some of the services. So large groups that would require a drop box, for example, is going to be less expensive for them. The porta potties is going to be a little bit less expensive. So, but there are some additional charges for the number of folks that will be in attendance at the event. So it's a little bit more expensive probably for groups, but it's more right sizing what folks are requesting and how we're providing the service. And I can definitely send that out to the groups so that you have that information. There was a resolution that was made just last night at the City Commission meeting. So this is of note for everyone who serves on a board or committee within the city. The new resolution states that all meetings will have a end time at 10 o'clock p.m. and that they can go until 11 o'clock p.m. only if all present members vote to move the end time to 11. So
You mean we gotta be here another hour?
so we'll be here for at least another hour.
You don't have as much as you used to.
So so we had some meetings, speaking of the length of some of the committees that are out there that do run late and have
We're talking planning.
some consistency there, yeah. So just so you know, so if we choose to go after 10 o'clock, you guys have to vote to stay late after class. Ladderette Park, just to keep it on your radar, I did meet this week with with Karen Burek, who's kind of the lead on the Ladderette Park grant process for the community enhancement grants, and we're kind of just moving forward. We'll have a DPAVE event there in the spring, and we'll have some planning efforts going into that as well. So just keeping that on your radar. And then Glen Oak Park, probably in January, maybe in February, going to commission to present some more information on Glen Oak Park, specific to kind of just the process, and we'll be presenting to this group as well in January. We did make a brief presentation to the Caulfield Neighborhood Association, speaking about the timeline of kind of the development of the park, being that we will have the park online in 2019. We should be through the planning and design process up until probably this summer, and then available for construction depending on the contractor and their ability to work during the winter season, opening up for construction between the fall and next summer. So planning on the summer of 2019 opening of Glen Oak Park, or the facility yet to be named, Glen Oak Park. The other piece to that is that we should be probably reconvening the park naming subcommittee for that piece of property. 2 members that had been voted in previously to serve, which I believe was Mike and Sean. And so we will probably be convening sometime in early January to probably start that process, and I'll be reaching out at some time shortly to initiate those conversations. And I think those are all my items.
Is that to say that it won't remain Glen Oaks Park? Is that one of the possibilities?
It could.
Could be a possibility.
Yeah. But it's not formally been given a name. That's been the working name for the site, that it's on Glen Oak Road.
Okay, any other questions for Phil? Okay, future agenda items. And you guys are having 2 presentations in January. Should be kind of fun.
I guess I would pose a question. They go through their budget process starting when next year?
Yeah, so we will have a, we have a midpoint meeting, so we're on a biennium budget, so the budget runs from July 1 of 17 through June 30th of 19.
Okay.
In January of 18, they will have their midpoint check-in, and although it is, only 6 months into the actual budget year, it is typically the midpoint of when they start the budgeting process. So they meet every January to discuss the budget and to look at what was spent in the current budget and to set priorities for the coming biennium. And so the January meeting of 18 will be to look at the current goals of the commission, evaluate the budget, how it's been sent, maybe talk about any adjustments to the budget that might need to be made. And then going into next year, the budget process would be in January of 2019 for the budget that would begin in July of 2019. A lot of the back-end work, finance starts working on that very early in fall. So they start kind of setting things in motion. All of the staff start looking at their budgets and setting goals. So I think it would be advantageous of this group to probably set a timeline to start talking about the budget process in fall of 18 for the soon-to-be budget, which would begin in July of 19.
I do have one other thing. Maybe in January, can you bring that comparison of our parks SDCs with our surrounding communities?
Yes, and you totally asked that, and I meant to include it in the SDC topic. I will send that out to the group, and then I will also, I actually have it, I asked for it, and it's sitting in my email.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I will send that out beforehand, and then we can definitely chat about that as well. And that was one of the conversations that I've had with Public Works as well as the city manager on SDC's methodology and maybe needing to look at revisiting that at some time in the near future. So.
He just wanted to make sure Sean was here for that discussion.
Yeah, right.
I had two items that I'd like to maybe possibly have as agenda items, and one of them again would be the McLaughlin Promenade project. By then, ODOT will have been well on their way to working through that stage and the impacts to the park, mitigation that we might be able to work some sort of solution out to be. I know that John Lewis had, you were present, of course, for that meeting, but there's possibilities that we might be able to get, the community might get ODOT to do some of the things that we're hoping to get done to some spraying or some of the, and maybe we could put that as an agenda item and see if there's been any change in working towards that grant money, Metro Enhancement Grant. The other thing I wanted to include again was the Buena Vista House and see where we are on getting that positioned for getting power back into that building and the possibility of doing some master planning in the park at Atkinson Park.
And I would say that the master planning process, and I know we talked about this a little bit, would probably come in line with kind of setting goals and objectives of PRAC and of Parks and Recreation going into the budget cycle. But yes, definitely, that is on the radar.
Okay, I'm hearing nothing
Wait.
else. What?
I have
Mike?
one more thing.
All right, Mike.
On the record, for everybody here, I want to say thank you to Joyce Gifford for her work as chair of PrAC and her work and her years on PrAC and her support of our parks and of our city. And you are a tremendous asset for this community, and we thank you.
Well, I joined this committee because it is the fun committee. And I will be around. I will still be on the Parks Foundation board and sometimes visiting you here. And I really want to see something happen at the little park called Filbert Run. And I'm going to be holding your feet to the fire to make sure that something happens for that little neighborhood park. It's actually a quite large neighborhood park. Okay. Your next scheduled meeting is for January 25th, 2018, 7 o'clock, right here in council chambers. And with that, I close this meeting at 9:10 p.m.